This morning we're looking at Nehemiah chapter 4, and the theme of our Bible study is the trowel and the sword. And that will make sense more as we go through this study. Those were the instruments that were used by the people building the wall, and you'll see why. But to set the stage, I want to just review a little of what's happened so far in Nehemiah. Nehemiah was in the Persian Empire. He's the cupbearer of the king, and he has found out that the people of Israel are living in destruction. Even though the temple's been rebuilt, the wall is completely burned to the ground. It's rubble, it's dirty, it's just ugly. And this is the key, when you do not have a wall, that means you have no security. So if you've got anything valuable in your house, if you do not have a wall, that means the people outside of the city can come in and just take it. So you can't go to work and expect to have anything in your house when you come back. It's a disgrace. On the other hand, this is God's city, his people, and yet your city looks horrible. It would be, like I said last week, if Sioux City downtown was completely in rubble. Would we really want to live here when the center of our city, our courthouse is in ruins? Because that's what the wall is too. The wall isn't merely protection. It's also a place of commerce. It's a place of your leaders would meet and make agreements with the people around them. Justice was had. That's where the court decisions would be made. So it's all of these things can't happen, at least as well as they normally would be, because the wall is not there. So so he comes to Jerusalem. He gets permission from the king, and he's gone around the city. He's inspected it. It's in bad shape. And then they've set out to build. Now, this is key. This is a ordained mission. In other words, he is on the right side of the law. The king has given permission and money to build it. And I want you to think about that as Christians. What is our job, and what have we been commissioned to do? We've been commissioned to make disciples of all nations, baptizing and teaching them. We have been given the commission to love our neighbor. We've been given the commission to gather and worship. We've been given the commission to take communion. We have the God-ordained permission to do these things. So when enemies come against us, and that's what we're going to focus on today, they are trying to stop what we've been ordained to do and given permission. And in our country, we have been given the freedom to do these things as well. So it's not merely a God-ordained thing, it's also a country-ordained thing. Our country calls us to do these things as well. And as you probably remember, Vice President Pence came to Iowa, and he said, make sure you're gathering in worship and praying for the government. In other words, it's a benefit to the government that we do these things. And I don't care which party it is, the government needs the church to be praying for it. Otherwise, it will come to it. So it's both God-ordained, and in our country, it is man-made ordained. But whenever you have, and this is key, whenever you have something that is God-ordained and it is working, do you remember we have a chief enemy named Satan, who is going to double down to try to stop it? And that's what we're going to see in our text today. So with that said, let's turn to Nehemiah. Whoops. Helps if I share our screen here so you can see what's going on. Nehemiah chapter 4. So I'll do a little bit of reading here just to get us started, and then I'll have some of you read as well. When Sanbellet heard that we were rebuilding the law, he became angry and was greatly incensed or indignant. He's mad. So earlier in the book, do you remember we had Sanbellet? He was upset that Nehemiah had come, but now his emotion has gotten worse. It's not just he's disturbed. He has become angry. And you might expect that of the enemy, Satan. And if we were to compare this chapter to today, you might say, when the church is now meeting again, what does Satan think? He's angry. He wants to stop it. He wants to. So I'm making a direct comparison between Sanbellet and Satan on purpose. I know they are two different people, but remember what Genesis 3:15 says. Remember that verse? Where it says that I will put enmity between you, the offspring of Eve, and the offspring of Satan. Well, who are the offspring of Satan? It's demons, and it's people who are on board with Satan. These would be the offspring. And he will crush your head, and he will strike your heel. So in other words, Jesus, the offspring of Eve, is going to crush Satan's head, and of course, he's going to strike the heel. So Satan is always striking the heel of Jesus and his church, and he still does it today. We should expect it. Now, you remember the church is an ordained thing. I've got a little document here. Let me see if I can show this to you. I'm going to share my word processor, if it'll let me. Okay. So God chose his people to reach the world through his chosen people. So Nehemiah was chosen to build the wall. Pastor Freudenberg today made a real good point. If you haven't seen the sermon yet, it's very good. But he pointed out that we are chosen to be people, friends with other people. In other words, we're bound together as family, and God put us there on purpose to nurture those friendships, along with sharing the gospel, along with baptizing and teaching. These are all our jobs. But why did he choose us? Did he choose us because we were great people? No. Deuteronomy 7:7 says, "For you are a people holy to the Lord your God. The Lord your God has chosen you to be people for his prized possession out of all peoples on the face of the earth. The Lord did not set his affection on you and choose you because you were more numerous than the other peoples, for you were the fewest of peoples. But because of the Lord loved you and kept the oath he swore to your fathers, he brought you out with a mighty hand and redeemed you from the house of slavery, from the hand of Pharaoh, king of Egypt." So God's purpose for each of us is pretty simple. You remember this? He made the people of Israel in the Old Testament a light to the nations. That's what they were supposed to be, a city on the hill. He uses the smallest people, the least powerful people, to show up all the great people so that they'll want to be people of God too. And it's the same mission of the church today. We're supposed to be a city on a hill, a light on a lamppost that shows the world that being Christian is better than the world. And so what you've got going on here is they're rebuilding the city. They're supposed to be the city on a hill so other people can say that's worth being, because following God is a good thing. And with the wall down, it makes it look like, oh, that's not a great place to live. To be a people of God means you have your wall destroyed. So you see, that's the other purpose of this. Okay, so let's go back to our scriptures again. So they're angry. So Satan's trying to stop it. Sanbellet. He ridiculed the Jews in the presence of his associates and the army of Samaria, and he said, "What are these feeble Jews doing? Will they restore their wall? Will they offer sacrifices? Will they finish in a day? Can they bring the stones back to life from these heaps of rubble, burned as they are?" And I love verse 3. Tobiah the Ammonite, who is at his side, said, what they are building, even a fox climbing up on it, would break down their wall of stones. So now, did you notice, I indicated this earlier, this is a God-ordained building of the wall. It's a government-ordained activity. So what power do the enemies have to destroy it?
None.
They don't have power. So the only thing they can use is discouragement. They can use ridicule. They can use discouragement. In fact, I've heard it said, David Guzik, who wrote the Blue Letter Bible, if you've ever run into that, it's a very extensive Bible study of the Old Testament. I heard him speak on this particular passage. And he said about this passage, the only thing Satan has, his best weapon in his arsenal. You know how you have knives in your drawer of your house? Some of them are sharp and some of them are not so sharp. And you know what I'm talking about. You pull out some and you think, I can't cut this piece of meat with this particular knife. But if I use this one, I can. So you pull out the sharpest one. And what is Satan's sharpest knife? It's discouragement. And he tries very hard to discourage his church. Now, if we look at our reading today, is what is said true in this reading? Let's go back over here again. So it says, what are these feeble Jews doing? Is that accurate? Are they feeble?
No.
Actually, it's half true. I think they are feeble. This is a very small group of people. You've got remember last week? You've got goldsmiths and perfumists building the wall. Do you think they're very good at this? I think it's half true. They are. They're feeble. Will they restore their wall? Will they finish in a day? Answer? Of course not. They can't finish it in one day. How long did it take the Great Wall of China to get built? Not a day. Same way, the wall down on the Mexico border. Politicians talk like it's going to be built in a day, but it doesn't take a day, even with the big equipment the United States has. No, can't do it in a day. So can you bring the stones back to life from the heaps of rubble, burned as they are? Can't. And could you imagine being there? I bet they're getting really down, because it's not just building the wall. They got to and think of it, they didn't have big equipment like we do. They would have had to individually remove all that rubble and take it away to the dump. And it's probably god-awful lots of hours worth of work removing it all. You got to get your shovel out one at a time, and my guess is a lot of it didn't move very well. As all of you know, building is a lot of fun. I don't know if you agree with me. I love to build, but I don't like all the stuff that you have to do to get ready to build. It's not so fun, because you got to get the ground leveled, you got to get it compacted, you've got to remove the old structure that was there, which in this case is true, or you've got to, in this case it's more of a remodel. There might be some you can deal with, but I mean, what you might think should take a month, it's taken a year. It's going to take 2 years. And so their discouragement would be a very, very easy thing to get at them. And I think what happens is we forget about the good things. We forget that this is a God-ordained activity. We're supposed to be making disciples. We're in church, and it seems like it's small. And I don't know if you noticed, even though it's been weird lately, our online and parking lot and in person, we're still worshiping the same number as we normally do. But we get discouraged because it doesn't seem as good. And we would like for it to all be better. And yeah, we do. But the work is still there, and it's still for us to be doing. And we don't dare stop it, even though Satan says, you guys are going to all be destroyed. Or like California, they tell, did you notice now they said that John MacArthur, they gave him a cease and desist. And of course, the police department won't enforce it because they're like where all the training happens for the police department. So, but I think the idea is we forget that God is behind us, and this discouragement stuff is actually, even though it's partially true, a fox probably could walk over it and knock it down. It's still God ordained, and it's still doing good work. Okay.
I got a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so the pyramids were supposedly built by slaves, but they are super constructed. I mean, they are measured in their right dynamics. Wouldn't these people coming of Egypt?
Okay, yeah, it's a good question. I'll give you a little bit of a historical answer to the question about the pyramids. The people of Israel most likely were the ones who built the pyramids back in Egypt. That was part of their work, and obviously there's going to be engineers and other people at that time too, and Egyptians. However, you got to remember that is almost 2000 BC. Now we're in 500, or actually now with Nehemiah, we're about 480 BC. So that's almost 1500 years later. So do they have skills? Certainly. I think there were builders among the Israelites, because remember they were in Babylon, and they've come back to Jerusalem, and God did tell them, be industrious and build and settle and plant and do all the things. So there are people among the group that know how to build. Don't get me wrong. So if the goldsmith is wondering, how do I build? He can go over to the builder in the next block and ask, how do you mix so you get good mortar? You know, they can ask. People are smart back then too. Just like today, Pastor Travis is no builder, but my dad was a carpenter, so I grew up with builders. And so if I have a question, I call Brian up and ask, or whoever. And so people are industrious, and they could figure it out. So I don't want to give any credence to the idea that they don't know nothing. These are smart people, and they could figure it out. But on the other hand, if you're trying to plant crops, if you're trying to run business, and you're building at the same time, I can gather how Sanbellet would work. This whole discouragement campaign to take them down. So let's keep reading in the scriptures, because it gets better or gets worse. Sanbellet's going to pull out all the stops he has to try to stop this.
Okay.
I hope that helps your question.
That does. I was just wondering.
Yep, nope, great question. So verse 4, hear us, our God, for we are despised. Turn their insults back on their own heads. Give them over as plunder in the land of captivity. Do not cover up their guilt or blot out their sins from your sight, for they have thrown insults in the face of the builders. Okay, so what's Nehemiah's solution to Tobiah and Sanbellet?
Pray.
Pray. That's the first solution. There's going to be two here. They start with prayer. And I agree with him totally. When Satan is coming at you, what should we be doing?
Right.
Pray that he be destroyed. In fact, Jesus said, pray for your enemies. Well, it sure doesn't sound like Nehemiah is praying for them. He was praying for their destruction, that they get what they've said back on their own heads. And to be honest, when you're frustrated with people around you, I think the very first solution should be take your frustration direct to God. Even if it's not the best prayer, give it to God. And there's a lot of prayers in the Old Testament like this, praying for the destruction of the enemies. Obviously, as Christians, we pray for their conversion. Lord, help Sanbellet become a believer. But if you've got somebody that's bad in your life that's just taking you down, I think praying that just take it to God how you feel it. Lord, we've got people trying to bring abortion into our land. We pray that they come to destruction. But how God answers it may be different. And that's what you're going to see next. The answer to this prayer is quite fascinating. Okay, so verse 6. So he prays, but what else does he do? Can I have somebody read this one? Nice and loud. Dwayne, Gretchen, would you like to read verse 6? It's a great passage.
How far do you want me to read?
Just one verse, and then I'll stop you, and then I'll have you read a little bit more afterwards.
Okay, so we rebuilt
Just a second.
the wall.
I'm going to try to turn on so that they can hear you. For some reason,
You keep freezing.
no, I got to turn on the speaker. Okay, go ahead.
So we rebuilt the wall. So we rebuilt the wall till all of it reached half its height, for the people worked with all their heart.
Okay, good. Stop right there. So we rebuilt the wall till it reached half its height. Now, notice they only get half the height. So it's not, realize this is the purpose of this law is to keep people out. So, whether it's 20 feet, you're at 10 feet. It's not quite where it should be yet. It'll help keep people out, but a 10-foot wall you can get over pretty easy with a ladder. And but they're working with all their heart. And I think one of the big points I want to make with this is this. As the church, what are we called to do? When we have problems as a church, what should be our first thing we do? Pray. Ask for God's help. And then second, we get out and start acting. Just because we pray doesn't mean we do nothing. Now we got to roll up our sleeves and go to work. And I'll give some examples in the Bible. David, when the enemy Goliath was attacking the people, what did he do? He started with prayer, and then second, he got out the slingshot and expected God to answer the prayer with his slingshot, and then he killed him. So yes, as Lutherans, we believe that God alone saves, God alone creates the church, God alone converts people. But does that mean we do nothing? No, it means we go out and share the gospel. It means that the trustees, work on the church building. It means that people in the church are about all these different activities. We're doing kind of a neat project coming up where we're going to help the homeless shelters, the stewardship board, Erica, and in particular, we're collecting all sorts of different supplies. But we don't just pray for the homeless shelter, we're going to actually do something about it. So God uses people to do his work. That's a primary belief of Lutherans. We don't just simply pray and expect God to miraculously have the church explode in size. No, he uses the people to get up and do some of the work. So Pastor Travis, remember I started this Bible study by saying we have two weapons. We have the weapon of the trowel and of the sword. Right now we're using the trowel. You know, it's building the wall. Okay. Gretchen, you want to keep reading? I'll have you go on there in verse 7 to 9.
But when Sanbellet, Tobiah, and the Arabs and Ammonites and the men of Ashdod heard that the repairs to Jerusalem's walls had gone ahead and that the gaps were being closed, they were very angry. They all plotted together to come and fight against Jerusalem and stir up trouble against it. But we prayed to our God and posted a guard day and night to meet this threat.
Okay. Thank you for reading there. Now notice you've got Sanbellet, and I'm kind of saying he represents Satan. So he has no authority to stop this wall, just like our government has no authority to stop the church. Absolutely none. But what do people use in our country to try to stop the church? Discouragement. That's chief one. Making fun of people. And I don't know if I still have this here, but let me see if I can show you a little screen. And I'll see if this thing will work. Yeah, here it is. You're not going to like what I'm going to show you, but I'm going to show you it anyway. But I'm going to this is the one nice thing about technology, if it works.
They thought they could make a critical where we will stop the work.
Okay. I'm going to put you guys on mute for a second. That way you can hear this. I want to show you a short YouTube clip. This is an example of what I think Satan is using today. See if I can get it to go to it. This is a comedian, Bill Burr. You're not going to like him, but it's worth hearing, because I think it's the same thing that Sanbellet was doing. Whoops. Let me try one other thing. I want to make sure everybody online can hear this. I've got a little button here that I can turn on so that in theory you can hear it. Okay. Yeah, no, it was bad, but I wanted you to see that because that's what Sanbellet is doing here. Whoops. See if I can get everybody back. Where'd you all go? Okay, did we lose everybody? Okay, there we are. I got to turn you back on. Okay. But the weapon is discouragement, and notice he uses humor. He's making fun of them. And no one likes to get made fun of. But I think when you get made fun of, what's the answer? You pray and you get to work. You have to just let those things go. And I think that's the point of what we're seeing here. Okay, let's go back to the scriptures here. And you're going to see that this is going to get worse. Because now Sanbellet is going to try to kill him, but he has no authority to kill him. So as a result, Nehemiah is going to do something about this. And I think this is a good reminder for us. Okay, can I have another reader read 10 and 11?
10 and 11. And Judea
Second,
said,
I'm going to turn on the volume so that people can hear you.
ready?
Let's try this. Okay, go ahead.
And Judea said, the strength of the bearers of burdens is decayed, and there is much rubbish, so that we are not able to build the wall. And our adversaries said, they shall not know, neither see, till we come in the midst among them, and they slay them, causing the work to cease.
Okay, so notice the people are kind of giving in to Sanbellet here. Their strength of the labors is giving out, and there is so much rubble that we cannot rebuild the wall. You notice they're looking at all the mess and they're thinking, this is too big of a job for us. It's too much work. We're not building, we're just removing this junk. And then the enemies, before they know it or see us, we will be right there among them, and we'll kill them and put an end to their work. Okay, here's the key that the enemies forgot, though. People overheard it. Just like today, we know what the devil's up to. We know he's out to try to destroy us, discourage us. And so that's a good thing, because we know his plan of attack. So we can do something about it. That's where verse 12 picks up. Then the Jews who lived near them came and told us 10 times over, wherever you turn, they will attack us. You see what's happened? They overheard the enemy. So now they're saying, they're going to attack us. They're going to attack us. What should we do? You know, it's kind of a scary thing. So here's the answer. This is Nehemiah. Therefore, I stationed some of the people behind the lowest points of the wall and exposed places, posting them by families with their swords and spears and bows. And I looked things over, and I stood up and said to the nobles and officials and the rest of the people, don't be afraid of them. Remember the Lord, who is great and awesome, and fight for your families, your sons and daughters, your wives, and their homes. And verse 15, when our enemies heard that we were aware of their plot and that God had frustrated it, we all returned to the wall, each to our own work. So if you're aware of Satan, and notice, and this is the key verse, I think, verse 16. From that day on, half of my men did the work, while the other half were equipped with spears, shields, bows, and armor. The officers posted themselves behind all the people of Judah who were building the wall. Those who carried materials did their work with one hand and held the weapon in the other. And each of the builders wore his sword at the side as he worked. But the man who sounded the trumpet stayed with me. Okay, so this was the point I was trying to make earlier. As a church, we are supposed to carry two weapons. Well, they're not both weapons. One is the trowel to be building. And I think, isn't there something to this? Jesus was a builder, right? Why did God choose a builder's family to be born into? Isn't that what God does? Is he builds? He built the church. He built the world, and he's still building it. And he uses that metaphor. I built on the foundation of the apostles and the prophets. So we're still using the trowel, and the building instrument is the word of God. It builds. But we also use the sword as Satan attacks, and he flees from it. And what is the sword of the Spirit? You all know this. The word of, it's God's word. And Satan flees from it. We know what Satan is up to. He is trying to attack and kill us, spiritually speaking. He uses things like that video I showed you, humor that is meant to discourage us, to say, oh, those people, they're foolish. They don't use science. They don't use their head. They're just, but you know what's funny? There's the Christians often use their head more than anyone else. In fact, I didn't bring this out, but basically he says those people, all they are working, they're just garbage men, and they're Walmart workers. You ever know this set in politics? Both sides do that. They said the followers of Trump, they're just people that work at Walmart. They're people that don't think. And so that's one of the chief arguments against the church. It's just people that don't think. They just follow. They were born into it, and so they never had to make any rational decision. And maybe you were born into it. But here's the thing. All of us have to make a rational decision. In fact, you have to be pretty smart to realize, wait a second, this world is bad. And we need a savior from it. And the scriptures are very historical and archaeologically proven. There's a lot of intellect that goes into it. Why do pastors have to get a master's degree before they can be a pastor? Well, the reason is because there's a lot of important stuff that we can learn. And being a Christian isn't being an idiot. And I look at our church, it's not just Walmart people, it's people of all walks of life, from doctors and lawyers and all the way down. Every job is important. So you notice even in our reading, you've got some people that are bearing the trumpet, others are building, still others are behind ready to attack. So some focus on one area or the other. Some are the soldiers, some are more doing the builder, some are doing both. But it isn't a foolhardy proposition to be a Christian. It takes all of the above. Okay. I wanted to read you a quote. I apologize. I did so much preparation today. I'm not letting you talk. This is what happens when I prepare.
You just want us to shut up.
There you go. Let me show you my notes here. So Christians, let's see if I can find this. I've got a quote I wanted to read. This is, how ought those who are mocked behave towards those that mock them? First of all, never yield an inch. Remember, you can be laughed into hell, but you can never be laughed out of it. A man may ridicule and give up what religion he thought he had, but if he cast away his soul, his companions who caused his loss cannot help him in the day of his travail and anguish and bitterness before the throne of the Most High. Then next, pray always, most for those who treat you the worst. I think that's a good point we can get out of this Nehemiah passage. Pray for those who treat you the worst. Make them constant subjects in your prayer. And then I would say, in your actions, prove the sincerity of your prayers by extra kindness to those who are unkind to you. Remember, the 2 Corinthians talks about by your good works, you heap burning coals on their head. Nehemiah doesn't go into that, but I wanted to add that part here. We have heard the old story, I've never heard this story, of the sandalwood tree that perfumes the axe that cuts it. And I love this point. Be like an anvil that never strikes the hammer back. Think of an anvil, you hit it. If you hit an anvil enough, it will break the hammer. The hammer will never, or the anvil will never be broken, but it never hits the hammer back. Yeah, Stacy?
So, the last week, one of the things I've been doing is writing.
Yeah.
And so as I come across someone new, I either A, don't know who they are because I've never met them, or B, they've rubbed me the wrong way at one point. And it's taken a lot. I've had to pray about writing these people. And I tell you what, if you sit down and you write a note of love from Jesus, it comes from the source of Jesus under. The fact that we come from the family of God, that's when it hits you. That we all are living together.
Mhm.
It's been good for me in that way. Some were really easy to write and some were really difficult. I have no idea who they are. And it's like writing a long lost cousin.
Yeah. Well, that was a really point, but we got to stop. So I don't know if you heard her. She was talking about trying to write people those that she likes a lot, and then also writing the ones that are difficult. People that may have rubbed the wrong way, and it's a benefit both ways. But I think it's a real good point. God does answer. He's on our side, but we participate